The movie starts with a fancy party in the Hollywood Hills, where everyone is celebrating a man named Edward Lewis. Edward is a big-shot businessman from New York who makes money by breaking up failing companies and selling them off. He's at the party, but steps aside to call his girlfriend, hoping she'll join him on a business trip. However, she's tired of always being there just when he needs her, and ends their relationship then and there. Feeling upset, Edward leaves the party early, driving away in his lawyer's fancy sports car, even though he doesn't really know how to drive it properly. His lawyer, Philip, is pretty worried about this. Edward accidentally ends up in a part of the city known for its nightlife and meets Vivian, a street-smart woman, and her friend Kit. Vivian is quite taken with Edward's fancy car, and, encouraged by Kit, she goes over to talk to him. When Edward asks for directions to Beverly Hills, Vivian offers to show him the way for a price. Edward isn't keen on the idea at first, but ends up agreeing, and Vivian hops into the car with him. They chat about the car, and Edward confesses he can't drive a stick shift. He then asks Vivian to drive him to his hotel, the Regent Beverly Wilshire, where he's staying. At the hotel, Edward decides on the spot to hire Vivian to stay with him for the night. As they walk through the hotel lobby, Vivian draws attention because of her outfit, but she's also amazed to learn they'll be staying in the penthouse suite. Curious, Vivian asks Edward about any significant others in his life. He shares that he's recently single, having divorced, and just ended a relationship with his girlfriend. That night, despite some initial awkwardness, Edward is charmed by Vivian. The following morning, Edward notices Vivian without her wig and mentions she looks even better. When Vivian inquires about his job, Edward explains that he makes a living by buying companies that are not doing well, breaking them apart, and selling them for a profit. He's currently eyeing a company worth $1 billion. Edward then proposes that Vivian act as his girlfriend for a week during a series of business events related to his attempt to take over a shipbuilding company owned by James Morse. He offers her $3,000 and a new wardrobe for her services for 6 days. Vivian is thrilled by the offer and agrees. Edward gives her money to buy a conservative yet elegant outfit for their upcoming dinner with James Morse and his grandson. When Vivian goes out to shop on Rodeo Drive, she's ready for a new experience. Vivian tries to shop for a new dress but is rudely rejected by the staff at a fancy store, leaving her upset. When she returns to the hotel, she encounters Barney, the hotel manager, who questions her appearance. After learning she's a guest of Edward Lewis, confirmed by a bellboy, Barney invites her to his office. He explains the hotel's dress code and, hearing about her shopping ordeal, arranges for her to get a cocktail dress from another store. With the new dress, Vivian seeks Barney's assistance again, and he graciously teaches her dining etiquette and how to behave at the important dinner she and Edward will attend. When Edward sees Vivian dressed up, he is amazed by her transformation and compliments her beauty. At the dinner, Edward introduces Vivian to James Morse and his grandson David, who is being prepared to take over the family business. The dinner doesn't go as Edward hoped. James and David are not keen on his plan to buy their company and break it up. Despite the business setback, Edward is taken with Vivian's new look and her presence. He opens up to her, sharing personal details about his life, including his complex relationship with his deceased father Carter, with whom he was estranged. The next morning, Edward sees that Vivian is hesitant to go shopping alone because of her previous bad experience. So, he decides to go with her and makes it clear to a store manager that he intends to spend a lot of money. He demands that the staff treat Vivian with utmost respect. As a result, Vivian is pampered by the staff, trying on many luxurious outfits and enjoying the VIP treatment. Feeling empowered, Vivian visits the store that had previously snubbed her. She confronts the saleswoman who mistreated her, proudly showing off her new purchases and highlighting the saleswoman's lost commission. After leaving the store triumphantly, Vivian continues her shopping spree. Meanwhile, at Edward's office, his attorney Philip notices that Edward isn't as sharp or ruthless in business as usual. The following day, Edward and Vivian attend a polo game for networking, where Edward introduces her as his friend. Philip introduces his wife to Vivian, but he grows suspicious of Vivian's influence on Edward, thinking she might be a distraction. During the game, David, the grandson of James Morse, meets and chats with Vivian. Philip observes them and jumps to the conclusion that Vivian could be a corporate spy, potentially gathering information for Morse. He confronts Edward with this accusation. Edward reassures him, explaining that Vivian is not involved in any espionage. She is just a woman he met recently, and there's no need for concern. Later, Philip inappropriately asks Vivian if she would be interested in being with him after Edward no longer requires her services. This deeply upsets Vivian, making her feel demeaned and cheapened by the whole situation, more so because she felt that Edward facilitated this perception of her. She decides to leave, asking Edward to settle her payment before she goes. Edward pays her, but Vivian, feeling devalued, chooses not to accept the money and plans to leave the hotel. However, Edward apologizes, admitting his jealousy over her interaction with David and recognizing that Vivian's genuine nature has positively influenced him. Moved by his apology, Vivian decides to stay, cautioning him against causing her any more pain. To make amends, Edward surprises Vivian with a trip on his private jet to San Francisco to watch the opera La Traviata, which tells a story similar to her own, touching her deeply. After the opera, Vivian requests Edward to take a day off work, to which he agrees, surprising even his lawyer, Philip, given Edward's usual dedication to his business. Edward and Vivian enjoy a leisurely day together in the park, growing closer. Later, believing Edward to be asleep, Vivian breaks her own rule against intimate interactions, and they share a tender moment, further deepening their connection. Vivian confesses her love for Edward, and as his business in Los Angeles is wrapping up, he's about to head back to New York. Wanting to maintain their connection, Edward suggests a plan to help Vivian leave her current lifestyle. He offers her a condo, a car, and an allowance, and says he'll visit her often. However, Vivian feels hurt by this proposition, seeing it as Edward treating her more like a kept woman than an equal partner. She shares a childhood memory with him, revealing she once dreamt of being rescued from her troubled home life, akin to a fairy tale rescue. Amidst this personal moment, Edward receives a call from Philip, with news that James Morse is ready to negotiate the sale of his company under pressure. Edward arranges to meet James, but decides to speak with him alone, excluding Philip from the conversation. In a surprising turn, Edward chooses not to buy and dismantle Morse's company, but to work with him to save it, influenced by his evolving relationship with Vivian and his re-evaluation of his own values. Philip, outraged by the lost financial opportunity and Edward's unexpected change of heart, confronts him at the hotel, but encounters Vivian instead. Blaming her for Edward's transformation, Philip becomes violent towards her, but Edward arrives just in time. He intervenes, protecting Vivian, assaulting Philip in her defense, and then terminates Philip's employment, standing up for his personal growth and his respect for Vivian. Philip confronts Edward, feeling betrayed after dedicating 10 years to working with him. Edward counters, emphasizing that Philip was only ever interested in the financial gains, not the ethical side of their business, and dismissively tells him to leave. Afterward, Edward tends to Vivian's injuries, and she expresses her admiration for his decision not to exploit James Morse's company for profit. Despite this connection, she insists on leaving, maintaining her dignity and independence. Edward respects her decision, compensates her for her time, and offers his business card, suggesting she reach out if she ever needs assistance. Before she departs, Edward, showing his genuine feelings, asks her to stay another night, not as a transaction, but if she genuinely wants to. Vivian declines and exits to the hotel lobby, where Barney has arranged a chauffeur to transport her and her belongings home. Back at her place, Vivian is motivated to change her life, planning to move to San Francisco, return to school, and leave her past behind. She shares some of her earnings with her roommate Kit, showing gratitude and friendship. Edward, meanwhile, prepares to leave for New York. Learning from Barney about the chauffeur service provided to Vivian, Edward reflects on his actions and makes a last-minute decision to visit Vivian's apartment instead of heading straight to the airport. He stops to pick flowers, reaches her apartment and serenades her with music from La Traviata, mirroring the opera they watch together. Climbing up the fire escape, he fulfills Vivian's childhood fantasy of being rescued. They share a passionate embrace, signaling the start of a new chapter together. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like to support the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this.